Okay, this is a presentation on a theology of the body by St. John Paul II from his Wednesday audiences when he was Pope. And it took a couple years that he finally put it all together. This is going to be part one of probably four parts describing the theology of the body. Um, it's called Bought with a Price. And I took a lot of this information from Bishop Paul Loverdy's pastoral letter that he gave to his diocese. Matt Fraud, who's well known in the area of porn and chastity. Also, Peter Kaplonis, who is a doctor and psychologist who's been working with many men in the area of addiction and understanding this whole epidemic, you might say, of people getting addicted to this area of pornography. And Dr. Mary Healy, who from the Sacred Heart Seminary, of her book Out of Eden, where she talks about John Paul's theology of the body. And of course, some of my own humble comments and additions to this PowerPoint. It starts off with, "You are not your own." It says in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, written by St. Paul, he says, "Did you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit living within you, which you have from God? You are not your own. You were bought with a price. So glorify God in your body." And when he means by you are bought with a price, he's referring to when Jesus died on that cross as a sacrifice to atone for the sin of Adam and Eve when they disobeyed God and took from the fruit and ate. And Jesus, he came in the form of man with a body to redeem man back into his kingdom, to set him free from the kingdom of darkness. So at the Last Supper, Jesus gave himself as an offering, a sacrifice, to pay the price to redeem us back from the kingdom of darkness, from Adam and Eve's rebellion and disobedience, where Eve was lusted and tempted by her eyes for the fruit, for the lust of the flesh, to taste it, and of course the pride of life, to gain all this wisdom that the serpent was deceptively deceiving Eve about, that God was withholding something from her. The Catechism calls lust a disordered desire. You lose your identity through lust and listen to the voice of the evil one, to grasp for ourselves things that we naturally desire. Now, it's not wrong to desire things. God put that within us as a natural thing. And I'm going to talk a little more about desire and the role of desire in our lives. But the one thing you have to remember is that Adam and Eve, they grasped, they reached out and took something when God said no. And in our own lives, sometimes God does not say no. Sometimes God says, wait, it's not time. It's wait for me to provide it for you, or wait for the right ordered time through marriage or through proper channels. But a lot of times when people lust after things, whether it's material things, sexual things, even lusting after knowledge, pride, wisdom, um, we have to put it all in perspective. It is deeply rooted in a good desire, but it becomes disordered when we start to want to control. That is the problem, where we need to realize that we are a creature and God is our creator. And lust perverts, you might say, our natural desires for pleasure and possession. And the danger comes when we worship creature more than creator. In Romans 1, it says, what happens when we're separated from God? We exchange the truth of God for a lie, and we revere the creature rather than the creator. And so the whole idea is to realize who we are, our identity as sons and daughters of God. And Adam and Eve, They were deceived. They were deceived in the sense of who God was as their father, as a good father. They were deceived into believing that God was holding something back from them, something they desired. And remember, desires we have within our heart, they are good. God puts them there. But they become disordered when we choose to control and when we want to have it. Or sometimes it's a good desire, but it starts to be, you may sway off towards original sin or towards our own fallenness from our fallen human nature. But we always have to remember, and this is what I want to emphasize, that our desires that God has given to us, they are good, but there are parameters, and those parameters need to be obeyed and followed, just like the commands that Adam and Eve received. But we'll talk a little more about that as we go along. But when we go to Mass, that is when we acknowledge who we are as creatures to our Creator, a Father. And every Mass, we renew our covenant. And as you remember, we learned all about covenants, how God made a covenant with Adam and Eve, and how God made a covenant with Abraham, and God made a covenant with Noah, and God made a covenant with Moses, and after Moses, he made one with David, and after David, eventually, the new covenant established through his son, Jesus. And when we go to Mass, we are renewing and reestablishing our friendship with our Father in heaven. We are acknowledging that we are creatures, that we are fallen, that we need help, and we're also acknowledging God for all the good things he has given to us. Because the Eucharist, the Holy Mass, it comes from the Greek word Eucharistia, and it means thanksgiving, and for saving us from our sins and calling us to this great family of God. And so every day we have this daily offering of one's life to God in gratitude through our prayer life, through a small offering through Mass, through all of the intentions that we do throughout that day. We are bringing meaning and purpose to our lives. We're not here just to make money. We're not here just to learn an education. We're not here just to acquire these things and go through these, these things that are natural in life. But we're here to live as a people of God. What does it mean to live your life for God and to offer up everything you are to him every day, thanking him for the good things, asking him for help in difficult things, and walking with him through the day, through prayer, through talking to him, through just remembering him? So this is, you could say, our life, our life with God has been given to us, a new life in baptism. Because in baptism, we are reunited. We become new creatures, united with Jesus. And we have a new spirit, a divine spirit, living, dwelling within us. So God has given us a body with a spirit that dwell together as one. Now, to step back from what I was just talking about, the theology, I want to talk a little more about what's going on today in our, you might say, our culture, and today with, especially with all the telecommunications we have and the technology we have, more than ever, it's becoming more and more pervasive in our television and our media and everywhere we look. It says here, never before in the history of telecommunications and media in the United States has so much indecent and obscene material has been so easily accessible by so many minors in so many American homes with so few restrictions. And that was a memo written to the Department of Justice back in 1996. Every year I ask my boys, when do you think that was written? Some boys say, 2005, 2001, 2015, but they don't realize it started way back when, in 1996. And you can imagine how it has grown so much from something so small, and it's growing bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. That is out of proportions right now. And we need to understand it. And to understand it is to be educated. So why is pornography evil? And sometimes we must begin with this recognition of the intrinsic worth and goodness of the human person. We did not have, if we did not have this inherent dignity, why would it matter how we use our bodies and, the way we used our bodies? Why would it matter? Well, because our spirit, the Spirit of God, is united with our bodies in baptism in a unique way, in a beautiful complementary way, that what you do with your body is going to affect your spirit. They are intricately combined. You cannot separate them unless death, and death will separate them. But until death, they are intricately united. And when you do something with your body, it's going to affect your spirit. And they are together. And the theology of the body is offering us a noble vision of humanity, how we should understand the beauty and the dignity of man and woman. Because today, in movies and televisions and books and our culture today, it really sometimes is degrading the way people treat themselves, the way people dress themselves, the way people use their bodies, and think of it as just like a piece of clothing you put on and put off when you feel like it. But they are so intricately combined that what we do with our bodies is always going to affect our spirit. And even something as simple as food. Are we eating good food? That affects our spirit, Are we getting good sleep? That's going to affect our spirit, So there's a balance. There's a balance in everything. And even you might say the fear of today, COVID-19, the fears out there in the world that affect our spirit. And that's why we need to keep our morale and our hope and our faith in God alive. Because what happens to our bodies, what affects us in our everyday life, is going to affect our spiritual life. And you need to balance them and keep a balance and healthy perspectives of your body here, eating well, keeping what you feed it and keeping what you see and what you read, and also how you pray. And all those things affect, intercombine with your spirit. So it insists on this integrity of the whole person, the soul and the body. The flesh is good and valuable. God created the body and he called it good. And God united the human body to himself in Jesus. When Jesus was born, incarnate as a baby, that Christmas morning, God took on our flesh, our humanity. God, who once was always spirit, the second person of the Trinity, Jesus, came down and was overshadowed and was born in the womb of the Virgin Mary. And that changes history. That changes everything. Now, we're talking about this myth about purity. Many people believe purity is a place to reach, like a destination. And if I look at my own life, when I was a young man, I had the same desires, the same compulsions, or the same interests that any young man would have. And, sometimes I fell, sometimes I was faithful and virtuous, and sometimes I was able to avoid looking, and sometimes the curiosity pulled me into that sin, and I'd go to confession and ask, Father, forgive me. I fell into it again. And then the priest understands that we're human. We're children of Adam and Eve fallen. And so we need to grow in a discipline of, and we'll talk more about this, of virtue. A virtue is the disposition of to do something good or a habit of doing something good. And so we're going to talk about that. But in reality, purity is not so much a destination. Like, I've reached it, I'm done with that. No, it's a daily choice. Every single day, you grow and stronger, and myself, decade after decade, growing in purity of eyes, purity of heart, faithfully praying, going to confession, receiving the Eucharist. Those things have strengthened me to grow as a man of God and to help me to avoid temptation. Now, all of us were always tempted. And I always tell my boys, right now at your age, you are growing into men. And your body's changing, your hormones are changing, and you have this incredible, strong desire within you because your body is changing, and you have an incredible interest, an incredible desire through your body, through your eyes, what you're attracted to, and your impulses that are within you. And as the church teaches, we need to control. We learn that we just don't do something as Mr. George talked about earlier. We just don't follow our impulses. We use our mind to understand, is that a good choice, or is that a choice that I need to wait for, or something I need to wait for that is in a proper, you might say, parameter of being married with someone. So purity, it's a daily choice by all of us. And as you grow older, you hopefully, if you're practicing virtue, if you're practicing good habits, you're growing stronger, and you're not so easily swayed by what your eyes may see or what may be something in front of you. You choose, say, I'm not going to look at that, or I'm not going to allow my mind or my temptations or these thoughts that come in my mind. I am going to say no. And that is how we fight this, you might say, this temptation or this impulse of being human. But let me give you an example. I always tell my boys this every year. Now, I'll tell you my great weakness. My great weakness is when, after a long day, you come home from work, you have dinner, you have like another hour or two, you're helping the children get down or whatever you're doing, in your own home. My weakness at night is I'm tired, and I always want something to pick me up. And my weakness would be a sweet tooth. I kind of feel like I'm tired. I'm put the children to bed. I got about a half an hour, 40 minutes to go to bed. And I know all day long, I've been very careful what I eat. All day long, I choose not to eat that, and I choose to eat good food. But in the evenings is when I am weak because I'm tired. And I just want a little pickup. Because sometimes when you're tired, you want a little more energy, but I don't want to go to bed because I only have a half hour and I waited all day to read this book or to do this or that. And I've known in my own life that at night I get weak. My strong resolve throughout the day is very, very small. And so I know that cookies or some kind of snacks or chips or pretzels or something like that, that will be something that I need to hopefully not give into. I always have one or two cookies probably, or a bag of chips or something like that. But normally I realize that this is the case with all people who fall into sin in one sort or another. That when you are weak, when you are tired, when you're not feeling good about yourselves, you have a tendency to to give in to impulses or desires that normally you're strong enough to say no to. You give into. And so a Christian must combat these movements of concupiscence. That's a big fancy theological word. It means we have this tendency towards sin, from original sin, from Adam and Eve and their fallen nature. And it never ceases to lead us into evil until the day we die. So we must combat these movements towards sin. And you wouldn't say, well, eating cookies is not a sin. No, it's not. But it can be disordered when I'm tired at night and eating 3, 4 cookies, and maybe some pretzels and maybe some chips here. Always, my wife comes down saying, no. You keep eating because you're tired. Stop eating. Go to bed. And you can see how my resolve, it gets weakened when we get tired, when we get frustrated, when we get, when our body and your spirit are just at a weakest spot. And that might be is when we have to be most aware of temptation. And talking about sexual purity, we need to learn how to control our appetites, you might say, of the body. We need to have discipline, and St. John Paul would call it self mastery. He called it a long and exacting work that we're never finished, that we're always, every single day, we have to be careful what we say, careful what we do, careful, in our lives. We have to use our mind, and we have to use discipline, and we have to grow in virtue. So this whole idea of purity, it is a long and exacting work that even at my age, even though I'm much stronger than I was when I was 18 or 19 years old, I still am not invulnerable. I have to practice discipline, and I have to practice virtue. It's much easier for me than it is for you because I have many, many years under my belt of practicing discipline. But you, at your age, you are most, you might say, as becoming a young man, you are going to be most, you might say, challenged and tempted, and you're going to have a long battle, especially the next couple, say 4, 5, 6 years, of growing in this habit patterns of discipline, of growing in virtue, of custody of the eyes, and knowing you shouldn't watch something or do something or that could lead you into that area of sin. Now, it's talking about purity. It demands a constant effort. And as it says, I said to you before, at all stages of life, we have to renew our effort every time. And if we do fall, and I said, when we fall, not if we fall. We're not angels. None of us are angels. We are men and women with a body and a spirit. We are flesh. And we are going to be tempted by our flesh, by our desires, disordered desires, that we need to get them in order. And Matt Fraid came up with this great battle plan to overcome his porn addiction that he believes is crucial and indispensable. Let me tell you a little about Matt Fraid. I have him on my website, on my teacher page, some websites from Matt Fraid and also Jason Everett, who came to CC, gave a talk. Both of them are well known for talking about chastity, talking about the effects of porn, and talking about dating, and all these areas that are very important topics. And you should be informed about them. And you should maybe visit the website, take a look. Good discussions, has good things available to look at. But he was a young little boy, around, I think he said around, what would he say, around 9 years old or something like that. And he was living in Australia, and he went to the back of his house, and his father had a little wood cabin or something where he kept tools and stuff like that for the yard and so on. But Matt one day went in there and he found one of his father's magazines. And as a young boy, he was just captivated by the pictures because remember, we as men are moved more by our eyes than anything else. God created us this way. Women are a little different. They're moved more by their heart and words per se. But when we see something with our eyes, we are easily moved and easily aroused. And Matt, as a young boy, he was captivated by those pictures that he's never saw before. And he'd keep going back every day looking at it. And then eventually that led on to more and to more and to more. And by the age of, I think he said something like 14 years old or so, that's only about 4 or 5 years later, he was addicted. At the age of 14, he was addicted. Addicted in the sense that he needed to see porn. If he didn't, his body, he would feel depressed. He would feel like, all the symptoms. We'll talk more about that happens to a person who gets so easily persuaded and caught up in this whole area of pornography. Now, Matt came up with this 5-step plan and has proven to help those who want to break free from pornography. He was talking about the average child's first exposure to porn is at the age of 11. For Matt, it was at 9. But so if you look at your own life, when was your first exposure? How old were you? You know, and it says here the ages of 15 to 17-year-olds have had multiple exposures to porn. 80% of the guys would say. And then the largest single population of internet pornography users are the ages of 12 to 17, almost like high school age. You're talking from 7th and 8th all the way up to high school. So it's something to be aware of. It's something to realize that you're not the only one being attempted. You're not the only one being caught with these desires, which is so easily today accessible to young men. But I want to, hopefully, through teaching you the theology of the body, you come to understand that it's very dangerous. And why is it dangerous? And why is it so easily, you might say, captivating and addicted? Addictive is something that you need to come back for more and more. The next question you might have is why should we fight for So the next question we have is why should we fight so hard for pornography?